Welcome to episode 2 of the Laymen's Guide to the World Cup. My name's Henry. Today we are going to go over Group A. So these next 12 episodes, actually 13 episodes, are going to go over the different groups. If you don't know what a group is that all 48 teams are grouped into a group of 4, and they play in a round robin. So that means they play each team once, and during this phase, each win is worth 3 points, a draw is worth 1, and if you lose, you get 0 points. And what these teams are trying to do is, if you get in first or second place in your group, you then get to automatically go on to the round of 32. Now, if you make it in third place, the top 8 third place teams move on to the round of 32. And based on your positioning in the group, that will determine, how good of an opponent you face. If you're a third place team, you're going to be facing a first place team from another group, and so they're likely to be a stronger team. But if you're first place, more likely going to play third place, so on and so forth. So it really determines basically how good is your opponent that you're facing. Do you got an easy one in round of 32, so it's easy to make it to round 16, or you got a tough one? You got a potential winner of the World Cup, so it's going to be a little harder. So that can determine everything. Now, with this group, Group A, we have Mexico, South Africa, South Korea, and the Czech Republic, or Czechia, whatever floats your boat on that one. And this is what I would consider more of a middle of the road group, where there's 3 teams that are about all the same level, and there's one team that you don't really know what's going to happen there. But they aren't all these teams. I wouldn't say any of these teams are World Cup winners or even destined for quarterfinals. So this is kind of a weaker group overall within the 12 groups, I would say. But there is potential for some really good soccer, some Cinderella stories, and for crazy shenanigans. So let's start with one of our World Cup hosts, and that is Mexico. Mexico, their nickname is El Tri, like try, in English, because they have 3 different colors. It's the 3 colors of their flag that represent them and their color, because it's also called the tricolors. It's another name in English. But their best performance ever at a World Cup is the quarterfinals, and that happened in 70 and 86, and that's quite a long time ago. Right now, Mexico probably has the worst generation of players they've had in a long time. So there's been a lot of rebuilding, a lot of refocusing. What do our tactics look like? Do we start involving young talent? So that's going to affect really what's going on, because in the last World Cup they got grouped. When I use this word grouped, that means they either got third or fourth place and they didn't move on. So whenever I use the word group throughout all these podcasts, or you hear it on a broadcast that someone's getting grouped, it means that they did not make it out of the group. So in 2022 they were grouped, which really, the antithesis of everything that's happening with Mexico really from that World Cup comes to Copa America, which it was a big year for celebration for Copa America, which is the championship of South America. But they invited a bunch of North American teams, CONCACAF teams, to partake. And in that tournament, Mexico got grouped again. So they've been through a couple coaches at this point in 2024, and they needed some rebuilding. That's where they brought in an old faithful like Javier Aguirre, and they brought in as an assistant Rafa Marquez, which Rafa Marquez has already signed a contract, and he's going to be their coach after this World Cup. So he's learning from Javier Aguirre, and this allows for him also getting familiar with the talent and the team, and it's kind of like a passing of the torch, because Javier Aguirre is an old guard guy, and here he is passing on to Rafa Marquez, who is a Mexican legend, to take over this team. So really, this World Cup's going to be a transition point for them. Because at the Gold Cup last year, though, they won it. And I've talked in the previous video that CONCACAF is not the strongest thing. It was a U.S.-Mexico final, which is what it normally gets to, is a U.S.-Mexico final. So we'll see. This is Mexico, out of all these teams, has the most to prove, because I would say Mexican fans are the harshest on their national team out of probably any team. Maybe England's up there, where they are extremely harsh. So they didn't qualify for the World Cup in the regular means. They were the host. In the World Cup, the host always gets a spot. Their vibe is very similar to the U.S., where it's this transition point of, are we going to be heroes or are we going to fail, crash and burn? But the fans are going to show up either way, and the opening match will be in Azteca, which is Mexico City. It's a massive stadium of 100,000 people. It's those fans are going to be rowdy and loud, and I think it's worth watching Mexican games just to kind of see the atmosphere of what's going on. Now, they do have some key players. You have Raul Jimenez, which is their striker, and more than likely he will be putting this team on his back. This last cycle, where you'll hear this word cycle over and over again, what we call, so it's basically once the last World Cup ends, that starts a new cycle until the current World Cup. So during these 4-year cycle, he's kind of been Mexico's hero, and putting a lot out there, and a lot of players haven't been performing, but he has literally put this team on his back and really has won games himself for this Mexican team to actually make them do well. So Raul Jimenez is going to be a very important player. He's old. He's 33. Can he do it? With that, you have their captain, Edison Alvarez. He's also a key point. He's the kind of the fulcrum in the midfield for Mexico. He plays for Fenerbahce in the Turkish league, and he's kind of had a rough couple of years. You know, he was coming up, having this high, even getting a transfer to the Premier League with West Ham, and then everything with kind of the story of Mexico has kind of fallen apart. So Edison Alvarez has a lot of point to prove as having the captain's armband, and is he as good as people say he is? And that's the other thing with another player that's going to matter for this team, and that's Santi Jimenez. Santi never shows up for the national team. He does not have a lot of goals. He's a striker. He's a promising striker. He lit up the Eredivisie, which is the Dutch league, and with Feyenoord, and I'm talking 20-plus goal seasons, a couple of them. Then he made this transfer to AC Milan, and he has fallen apart in Italy. And he just never shows up for the national team, whether it's because of tactics or I don't know what. But it's always been an issue for Santi. So will Santi be a hero in this World Cup? We'll find out. So the worst possible outcome for the Mexican team is they get grouped again. I think that's going to cause the country of Mexico to implode. Putting it nicely. They're this team matters to this country deeply. So if they can't get their act together, everything's going to fall apart, and they're just going to go through the merry-go-round of coaches and firing people and whatnot. But success is at least round of 16. Other than that, the country will implode. But the thing is, with this team and how big this World Cup is, in Mexico, a lot of times coming to the occasion in these kind of tournaments, that's where I see them. I see them a round of 16 team. You got host magic. They've been playing well lately. So I think the opportunity is around 16, but I really don't see them past that. So I think that's what would be a success. I think that's what's going to happen. So we'll see with Mexico. It's the the destiny of this tournament is in their hands, and will they upset their fans or will they punch above their weight? So that's the big storyline with them. Now you have South Africa. Their nickname is the Bafana Bafana. They're probably most iconic for their introduction of the vuvuzela. You know, the big horn that goes kind of like a humming, kind of like a bee thing. But this will be their 4th World Cup. They don't go to the World Cup often, and it's really been in modern era. Because the first time they made it to the World Cup was '98. Then they were in 2002. Then they were in 2010, and now they're in this World Cup. But the best they've ever done, they've been grouped every World Cup. They have never made it out of the group stage. So, will this be the time where they make it through? That's the question they have to ask. But there is some hope, because with the African Cup of Nations, AFCON, that happens every 2 years. And in 23 they got 3rd place. In 2023 they got 3rd place for AFCON. And then for 2025 they're in the round of 16. So they're getting out of groups, they're being competitive. So will that help them? And how they qualified for this World Cup is very interesting, because they won their group, and their group had Nigeria in it, which is usually an African powerhouse, but Nigeria did not qualify for the World Cup. But in both their matches with Nigeria, they tied, which is a good sign for them. And they went 5-3-2, so they only lost 2 games. So, can they make some magic happen? That's the question with this team. And that's the vibe, is that they're just happy to be here. I think they're going to be grouped. I think what would be considered success for this team is a round of 32 versus through that 3rd place finish. But honestly, more than likely they'll be in 4th place in this group. That's what I'm thinking for them, is that they'll be dead last in this group. I think, but you could consider a success with that if they can at least take a draw off someone. That'd be good for them and good for morale as a country. They do have some interesting players like Ronan Williams. Their goalkeeper is very important, and he's also their captain. Then you have Tabuo Makende, which is a midfielder for them, and then Lyle Foster, who played this Premier League season with Burnley, but they just got relegated. So he's their big striker up top. So can these guys create some magic? That's the question. Or are they just going to be grouped again? So really, progress for them is getting out of the group stage. And I think they'd be just happy with that. Next, you got South Korea, also known as the Tigers of Asia. They have a big old tiger on their emblem. And they are an interesting team. Arguably, from my point of view, they are the strongest team in this group. They're stronger than Mexico. They're stronger than Czechia. The best they've ever done in the World Cup was when they hosted in 2002, and they made a 4th place finish. That was a Cinderella story of this small host country of South Korea punching above their weight against European and South American powerhouses, making it all the way to the semifinals and eventually losing out. But still, it was an awesome story. So can they do something like that again, even though it is in America? At the last World Cup, they did have a round of 16 is where they got knocked out. So they got out of the group stage and then lost in the first of the knockouts. And with the AFC Cup, that happened in 2023, that's the last Asian championship, they are made semifinal, which they've won this tournament before. They're consistently, year after year, every time this tournament happens, pretty much always making it to the semifinals. It's almost a lock. So, and here's the thing. They went undefeated. They were 6 wins, 4 draws in their World Cup qualifying. So, and 2 other teams that are going to be in this World Cup from Asia were in their group, which was Jordan and Iraq. So, going undefeated in this group, they're superior. They're against 2 other teams in Asia that made it into the World Cup. So they're no slouch. And I think that's the vibe, is they're really here. They're here to prove something, that they are just as good as Japan, who is their main rival within Asia. and that it's their time. What's also their big three is Son Heung-min, also known as Sonny. Used to play for Tottenham legend there in the Premier League. Now he plays for LAFC. This will be his last World Cup, more than likely. And can he create some heroics for this team? He's this really good attacker. But going into this World Cup, he hasn't had the best start to the MLS season. So, can just the hype of the World Cup bring that out of him? Then anchor in their defense, they have Kim Min-ji, and he's there at Bayern Munich. He's their center back, kind of that rock in their defense, along with Lee Kang-in, which is their center mid for PSG, which they just won the Champions League last week. So these three players, they have good players playing for some of the top teams in the world. Bayern Munich and PSG, and then formerly Tottenham, aren't slouch teams. So they can do something here. I think the worst outcome is getting grouped, but I think what's considered success for them is the round of 16. But kind of where I feel they'll probably end up, they're going to have a first or second place finish in this group. Because will Mexico get first with that host team magic, or will they not? That's the question. That's the storyline. But I see them getting to the round of 32, and depending on who they're up against, they're knocked out or they're going forward. So it's about their own destiny. I think they can punch above their weight, or will they just be overpowered by a European or South American powerhouse? Only time will tell. But I know for sure, I feel like guaranteed that they'll get out of this group. It's just whether or not, how big of a run can they make? So, that is South Korea. Next you have Czechia. Their mascot named the Repri, which means they're representatives in their native tongue. The best they've ever done is second place in the World Cup, but that was back when they were Czechoslovakia. And this has been in the 1934 and the 1962 World Cup, because this country, was Czechoslovakia, was a powerhouse in global soccer. Always doing really well in the Euros, and then and also in the World Cup. But ever since they've split and kind of been the Czech Republic, Czechia area, they haven't done as well. They've only made it to one World Cup since they've been the Czech Republic, and that was 2006, and they were grouped in a group with us, the United States, and Italy, the World Cup champions that year, and Ghana. So that's the last time they've been to the World Cup. But in the meantime, they have gone to the Euros, and they were grouped at the Euros as well. So what's going to happen here? This is an old power. Can they reclaim this power in a new era? We'll see. This is a very interesting team because of that. They got second in the World Cup qualifying group, which their World Cup qualifying group did include Croatia, which Croatia's made it to the semifinals in the last two World Cups, including the final in 2018. So Croatia is no slouch. So they've had good competition. But then they had to go through a playoff tournament to make it to the World Cup through UEFA. They beat Ireland, and then they beat Denmark on penalties to make it to the World Cup. So that adds another factor here, right? They had to prove that they were good enough to be here. So will that light a fire with them? We'll know soon. So, because that's kind of their vibe. Are they just happy to be here, or are they ready to reclaim an old power, as the Czechoslovakia was such a great nation? They do have some interesting players. We got Patrick Schick, which he will be their main powerhouse up top. He plays for Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga, which is the German league, which is usually their top four team. They even won the title a couple of years ago and went undefeated to win that. He was part of that team. So, and he can create some magic up there up top. So, if you watch any of their games, he's the guy that's going to be making all the magic happen. Then you have their captain, Thomas Sukic, plays for West Ham in the Premier League, which they got relegated this year. He's kind of what holds their midfield all together. Then you have another attacker, Adam Helzek, plays for Hoffenheim in the Bundesliga. And he's kind of their other player that kind of has this attacking experience. So, but mostly this Czech team is very inexperienced, have not a lot of them played in major tournaments. So they're kind of the wild card in this group. I mean, the worst case scenario is they get grouped. But what I think what's a success for them is round of 32, and if they can go beyond that. What I think will most likely happen is they'll get third place in this group, and then they'll lose in the round of 32. So we'll see what happens here. Like I said, this is not the strongest group, but there's some interesting storylines of South Korea proving themselves, Mexico as the host. Can they make some magic happen? South Africa, can they go beyond of what they've always been? Or can Czechia reclaim old glory? So a lot of storylines going into this one. And it'll be an interesting group where a lot of these teams are at the same level, and we'll just see who wants it more. So that's what's going to be interesting with this group. It's going to be a group where every game's a fight. So, and I think that's what makes good soccer matches, is where it's not a demolishing. It's not like we'll get to later, but like Portugal versus Carousel. These teams are all pretty even, and they'll just have to fight. Who's going to be the scrappiest? Who's going to not give up till the final whistle? And we'll see what happens. Like I said, this is going to be an interesting group to watch, and there's a lot of storylines that go into it. So I hope that help you understand what's going on with Group A, and we'll see you tomorrow as we talk about Group B. I'll see you next time.